Hello, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we are diving into a major geopolitical shockwave that has rattled Europe, reshaped the balance of international power, and revealed just how quickly alliances can shift in a world on edge. The latest controversy centers around Russia and China blocking new European and American-backed sanctions against Iran. This move has ignited outrage in European capitals, raised serious questions about the effectiveness of Western foreign policy, and highlighted a deeper geopolitical alignment forming across Eurasia. To understand the full significance of this development, we have to step into the complex arena where global diplomacy, strategic influence, and great power competition all collide. The core issue is not simply whether Iran should face sanctions. The deeper meaning lies in how Russia and China openly defied Western pressure, demonstrating that the United States and Europe are no longer able to dictate global policy the way they once did. The world has been shifting away from unipolar dominance for years, but this moment may be one of the clearest signals yet that a new multipolar order is forming, one where the West's power is challenged not only militarily, but economically, diplomatically, and ideologically. Europe had been seeking to impose new sanctions against Iran in response to what it called destabilizing activities in the Middle East. These sanctions were intended to limit Iran's international financial networks, restrict arms development, and weaken the country's ability to support allied groups in the region. But for sanctions to be enacted at the United Nations, they require the approval of the UN Security Council. And that is precisely where Russia and China intervened. Using their veto power, both countries blocked the sanctions, effectively stopping the Western proposal in its tracks. For European leaders, this was more than a political defeat. It was a wake-up call. For decades, Europe has operated under the belief that diplomatic pressure, international law, and multilateral institutions could be used to shape outcomes. But now, the system that Europe helped build is working against it. Russia and China are using the same rules, the same institutions, to limit Western influence and protect their own strategic partners. The anger in Europe comes from several layers. First, European officials feel that Iran poses a security risk in the Middle East, particularly with its missile development and support networks extending through Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Second, European governments believe that Iran's growing relationship with Russia and China could shift the balance of power in ways that reduce Europe's influence globally. And third, after years of relying on diplomatic approaches rather than military intervention, Europe fears that its soft power strategy is weakening. However, to understand why Russia and China acted so decisively, we have to look at the broader geopolitical landscape. Russia sees Iran as a key ally in countering the United States and NATO influence across the Middle East. Iran has supported Russia in various strategic arenas, including helping to maintain influence in Syria, where both countries work together to prevent Western-backed regime change. In return, Russia has supplied Iran with military technologies, energy cooperation, and political support on the world stage. By blocking sanctions, Russia is defending not only Iran, but also its own strategic foothold in the region. China's interests are different but no less significant. China views Iran as a critical partner in its Belt and Road Initiative, a massive infrastructure and trade project linking Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. Iran sits at the crossroads of key trade routes, pipelines, and energy pathways. China has invested billions in Iranian ports, railways, and energy production. Beyond economics, China sees Iran as a counterbalance to American dominance in the region. By blocking sanctions, China signals that it is ready to defend its strategic investments and partners. Together, Russia and China are demonstrating that they are willing to act in unison to push back against Western-led pressure. This is perhaps the most alarming part for Europe. For decades, Europe has operated in a world where the greatest powers were either aligned with it or at least not openly coordinated against it. Now, Europe faces a situation where two nuclear superpowers, both permanent members of the UN Security Council, are forming a strategic front that challenges Western diplomatic power. This is not just about Iran. This is about the future of global order. Europe's frustration is also tied to the fact that it has been trying to balance relations with Iran for years. Even after the United States withdrew from the nuclear deal with Iran in 2018, Europe attempted to keep the agreement alive. It even built special financial mechanisms to trade with Iran without using the US dollar, trying to avoid direct conflict with Washington. But now, Europe feels boxed in. It can neither fully support US pressure nor maintain open cooperation with Iran without escalating tensions. And Russia and China have now stepped in to claim the diplomatic influence that Europe once had. This is where the shift becomes even more dramatic. The sanctions veto does not only shield Iran, it actively strengthens the Russia-China-Iran strategic triangle. This trio now controls major energy corridors, military exchange networks, and diplomatic leverage zones stretching across Eurasia. Meanwhile, Europe is heavily dependent on foreign energy, dealing with internal political divisions, and struggling with declining global manufacturing competitiveness. The balance of influence is shifting, and the momentum is moving eastward. In response to the veto, European officials issued statements condemning Russia and China, accusing them of destabilizing peace efforts. But the truth is more complicated. The idea of Western-led global governance is weakening because other major powers no longer see advantage in the system. The post-World War Roman II international order was built at a time when the United States and Europe dominated global industry, finance, and military power. But now China leads global manufacturing, Russia controls massive resource networks, and Iran commands ideological and strategic influence across the Middle East. The world has changed, but Europe has struggled to adapt. This is not to say Europe has no power left. European economies are still among the largest in the world. European diplomacy remains influential in many regions, but without unity and without recognition that the world is becoming multipolar, Europe risks losing relevance. Some European leaders are beginning to acknowledge this. They argue that Europe needs to become more militarily independent, more economically sovereign, and more strategically bold. Others believe that diplomacy should remain the primary path, warning that escalation could lead to greater conflict. Meanwhile, Iran has responded to the blocked sanctions with confidence and renewed assertiveness. Iranian officials declared that the veto demonstrates a rejection of what they call unjust Western pressure. They argue that Iran is not isolated but integrated into a rising Eurasian network. And in practice, this appears increasingly true. Iran has joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is deepening military cooperation with Russia, and has expanded trade agreements with China. This does not mean Iran is free from challenges. Its economy is still constrained, its domestic political climate is tense, and its regional policies remain controversial. But the ability to shield itself from Western sanctions with the backing of two great powers changes its strategic position in profound ways. Iran is no longer facing pressure alone. It is now part of a larger geopolitical architecture, reshaping global alignments. What this moment truly reveals is that we are witnessing the decline of Western unilateral power, and the rise of a new strategic order. The world is no longer defined by one dominant power, but by competing centers of influence. Russia, China, and Iran are asserting themselves not only militarily, but through diplomacy, energy networks, trade corridors, and strategic alliances. Europe and the United States are being forced to adapt to a world where their policies can be vetoed, blocked, or bypassed. The question moving forward is whether Europe will respond with unity and strategic clarity, or whether internal divisions and dependency issues will continue to weaken its global influence. Will Europe move towards strategic independence from the United States? Will it attempt renewed diplomacy with Iran, or will it escalate tensions and risk deeper geopolitical confrontation? For now, the message is clear. The era where Western powers could shape global outcomes without challenge is ending. A new balance is taking shape, a balance defined not by ideology, but by interests, alliances, and strategic geography. And the blocked sanctions against Iran will be remembered as one of the turning points that made this shift impossible to ignore.